So, so hey, good morning, evening, afternoon. I think we're covering all the time spectrums. So very thankful to have you guys here on the webinar. And the webinar is a follow-up from a piece of research from a study that was conducted over the last couple of years that myself and Cobus Deploy, who I must honor at the beginning. He's a magnificent man down in Otago University who really took the work and made it much more, I suppose, tangible and I suppose much more absorbable for something like a journal. So as I mentioned, my background isn't in academia. I've sort of stumbled into that a little bit later and have really enjoyed the academic side of things. And for me, the research side was very much a exploration into probably 20 years of work and to think, well, you know, what's happening in this space and how can we do it much more effectively. So to begin, I'm going to give you a couple of stories, and I think the stories are important to frame the work and to frame why this initiative for me became really, really important, really, really critical. So I suppose that the overriding picture is that if we have a look at if we had a look at the journey of mental performance, of mental skills, particularly and I'm going to refer to here a lot around the elite sporting space, but I'm not going to limit it to that. Okay. So if you're in different aspects, if you're in the amateur game, if you're doing different things along the line, I want you to be able to think in an application mindset. This is how it could look in mine. But what I'm going to refer to throughout the presentation this morning is very much the experience I've had, which has been within elite sports. And so the journey of mental skills has been an interesting one. It's a relatively new practice still. If we look at the overall things that would make up a performance jigsaw. So if we look at coaching has been going on for a lot of years. If we look at things like S&C, probably the last 30, 40 years, that's become a massive priority where mental skills is just a little bit behind the mental performance world. And so where I think we've got to is I think we've now, particularly with this younger generation or the generation of athletes coming through, we've got the idea that it's now normalized, which I think is a really important phase to get through, because you can't integrate something until you normalize it. So what I mean by that phrase is that you can have a something that you think could be integrated in A, B, B, C way, but if it's not accepted or in some sense normalized, for use of a better term, into the overall appetite of those that are in performance, leading performance, and those that are shaping performance, then we really have no opportunity for integration to occur. So I think the last 10 years in particular, maybe 15 if we go back that far, man, things are getting normalized. People, when they think about high performance, they think about the mental aspect of that. When they think about being at their best, they think about how am I going to perform under pressure. When they think about how they be successful on the longevity of their career, they're thinking about how important mindset is going to contribute to that and be to that. So I'm not going to labor much on that, but I think it's important that we recognize it, because without that normalization, all we would be doing was be trying to push a subject into the performance space that has not yet been accepted by the masses. So acceptance has happened. So for me now, the next phase, which is one that I obviously have a lot of passion and a lot of energy about, is then how do we take this thing from normalization into integration? And where does that passion come from? It's a good question when I think about it. Well, I'm going to give you a couple of stories, and these stories were ones that sort of shaped my journey into this space. The first one is in the early 2000s. It would have been around probably 03, 04. I can't remember the exact time. I was in Phoenix, Arizona, or I was actually in Scottsdale, and there was a spring training that I was a part of with a Major League Baseball team. And it was one of those, for those that have been in Phoenix, one of those absolute bluebird, crystal clear days, where a little chilly in the morning and just absolutely brilliant. Mid-70s, days you love in the middle of January, particularly if you live anywhere north in the United States. And we were gathering, and I remember I was sitting next to the manager at the time, or was standing over the rail, and I was looking out over the field, and boy, there must have been 200, 300, 400 of these young men, and they were part of the minor league camp. So the minor league camp and the major league camp sort of run a little bit simultaneously, but they're in different aspects of the complex. And so, you know, I was talking to the manager, and I said, you know, I look at all of these young men, they're here, they're probably given their lives, and, you know, they're about to hopefully actualize or realize a dream. And I said, you know, how many of these guys make it to the big leagues? And back then, I can't remember the exact number now, but I mean, back there, I think that what he said to me, around 8 to 10%. So it was quite a minimal number. We weren't talking about, 50% of those get drafted will now find themselves on a big league field. It was around 8% of those who get drafted would actually play in the majors. And this sort of, I suppose in my mind, I was like, wow, okay, well, if we're dealing with such a low number, what's going to be the contributing factors? What's going to be critical here? What's going to be key here? And as I was speaking to him, I said, look, they all physically look the same. And they do. Obviously they have different shapes and sizes, but as far as physical specimens, they're all in pretty good shape. And their core skills around whether they were a pitcher or a hitter, they all look like they do it really, really well, else they wouldn't be here. And I said, well, what's the point of difference here? And he said, it's the top 2 inches. And I said, okay, that's interesting. What are we doing about that? And, what began to happen was pretty obvious. He sort of shrugged his shoulders in quite a sheepish way, if I suppose I could describe it in that way, and quite sheepishly walked away, and he said, nothing. And it was beginning of my journey into this space, so I wasn't exactly there as a perceived expert telling him what we should do, but it stimulated this thought, is that we've got this part of performance. It's not much different now. Everybody knows it's valuable. Everybody knows it makes a difference. Everybody knows that it's something that we want to grow and develop. But there was this big question of how do we take it from something that is sort of on the outer and in some senses has a bit of marginalization around it because of how people feel about the mental side of performance. And what I mean by that is when you talk about people's fitness, or they talk about their skill, it doesn't require them to be vulnerable or open or, have aspects of their life that they might be uncomfortable talking about. But when we talk about the mental side, it's a very vulnerable place to talk about. So we know it's vulnerable, we know it's important, and yet, and this is what the research said, which is very, very interesting, is that 100% of the people that were part of the research all agreed. Not one said, I don't know about this stuff. All of them agreed massively. This is a important part of performance. We need to get it right. And the follow-up questions were that, well, how many of you actually, and going back to that story, how many actually doing something about it? How many of you actually have a program in place? I think that was the language I used, because I wanted to make it program/strategy. I wanted to make it something that would be tangible for them to either identify that they were a part of it or they were not. And what happened is that only 11% of those that were part of the research said, yeah, we got something in place. So once again, just demonstrating further, we have what I would call a difference between perceived and actualized value concerning the mental side. The perception is we might have someone in the building. The perception is, yeah, and you've heard coaches say it over the years, which is a throwaway line, but incredibly unhelpful. Yeah, the game's 90% mental. And we all know that's not true whatsoever. The game was 90% mental, then why aren't we training at 90% of the time? So what they mean is that once we have physically fit athletes, once we have technically competent athletes, there is a point of difference in that last 10, 20%, which in the end could determine the difference between us having success and us not having success. And that little bit there, we don't know what to do with. We know it's important. The second story around this, so I just want to demonstrate or illustrate to you, listen, we do have normalization, we don't have integration. There is a perception out there that we're actually doing the stuff, and reality is we're not. Okay, so that was the first sort of story that shaped, like, how do we actually then begin to bridge the gap so that what we think is valuable is actually translated into actions on the ground where we can see tangible results. So the second story, let me get to that. Second story was a number of probably 2 or 3 years ago, in lockdown, maybe just before lockdown. I've never really been that active on social media, but before lockdown, I was thinking, and lockdown sort of arrived, is that, listen, I've been doing this for a number of years. I'm just going to get on, and LinkedIn was the first thing I got on and said, I'm just going to share some of my experiences. I'm going to share what I'm seeing and feeling and experience as a practitioner in the field. And I'm wondering whether it will resonate with people. And, I wonder it could be helpful. My whole sort of motivation at the beginning, and still is a motivation today, is that I so believe that this part of performance is so critical and vital and necessary. It can, for teams to be unlocked, and also for individuals to be unlocked. And going back to the sort of the motivation behind it for me is like, I think it's a tragedy that we have so many athletes, and I wouldn't put myself in this category, but can certainly relate to this, is that they walk away at the end of the career and you ask them, did you really think you translated your potential into performance? Did you actually nail what you were capable of? And I think so many of them would come back and say, no, I don't think I did. And there was an interesting study that sort of related to this. It was done after 2016 Rio Olympics with the New Zealand Olympic Committee. And the study came out is that how many of you felt pleased with your preparation? And I think it was like 95%. And how many felt pleased with your performance? And I think the number was much, much lower, maybe half of that. Like, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. But what it was demonstrating is that good preparation is critical. But if you can't access and deliver on the work that you've done to prepare for the event because of the presence of pressure, then that preparation can be largely wasted if you don't have the tools to navigate through pressure. And so here we have all these people working tremendously hard, doing amazing work. They're training their absolute brains out. They're preparing for these events. And then the conclusion was, my preparation was awesome, my performance was not, and there was a gap between what I am capable of and what I ended up delivering when it matters. And to me, that's where mental skills or mental performance sits. It sits in that gap of narrowing and working at narrowing the gap between what someone is, their potential and what they actually deliver. And so as I got in on LinkedIn and then of late Twitter the last year or so, what I began to get was stories, and I'd get so many DMs from people saying, hey, I read your post and, listen, I'm in a team and I'm really struggling, or I got hired for this job last year and I'm not really having any impact. And I can't work out how to have more impact, or I can't work out. And these are really incredible people. They're people that are highly qualified. They're people that are excellent in their craft, the majority of those that I spoke to. But yet here they were sitting in the background going, I'm struggling. I don't know what to do. I know that there's something more, and I know that my work could have more impact, but I'm really, really unsure of how to move forward. And so what I wanted to sort of frame that with you to understand is simply this, is that we have a lot of people that are really good at their job, that are really wanting to do great work. And my motivation, I suppose, behind this was twofold. Number one, I wanted to see how we can help athletes better. So if we get integrated into a system better, if we get integrated into a team better, if our work can get integrated better, it will have positive effect on the athletes. It will help them be able to do what they're trying to do. But secondly, it was sort of out of a bit of sadness, but to be honest, in some cases, a lot of anger when I heard the way that people were treated and the way that they were set up in some senses to fail in this role. And that, gosh, I was just thinking for the last couple of years, we've got to do a better job of this. I'm sure we can do a better job of it. I'm sure we're able to create something that allows this really important part of the work to have the impact that we all envisage and desire. So that is the background around that. Just so you're all sort of clued into the background, I wanted to make sure you understood that. Now, let's get into the work itself. Okay, so what I'm going to start off with, understanding the importance of a system. So this is particularly directed towards those that are either head coaches or those that are performance directors, but also I think it's incredibly important information for you to have if you're a coach, if you're a mental performance, mental skills sports psych. Okay, here's why it's so important. Because if you can understand or design the system to have that work have impact, then the work will grow and grow and grow and grow. Right now, in some cases, and I use this as an example, which is someone asked me, what's the worst thing you can do? I said, to me, it's very simple. The worst thing you can do, you can hire someone, pay them whatever you want to pay them, and then put on a group chat or introduced at a meeting with them sitting in the back of the room. Hey, this is Jenny. We've hired Jenny. She's in the mental performance space. If you want to, she's going to be in here half a day a week. Maybe we might stretch it out to 3/4 out of her goodwill. And if you're struggling, go and have a chat. And I just think, oh my gosh, you could not set the workup for worse failure than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the system. So here's the first principle I want you to understand about the structure, system, strategy. Whatever language fits with you, use. I'm pretty relaxed about it, okay? So here's the principle. We want to build, and I want you to understand this language, build a strategic program rather than offer a reactive service. Okay, so let me sort of unpack that a little bit as the premise for what I'm about to present around the system. Meaning, right now, most of the mental performance work is reactive. So typically someone will play a game in the weekend, they'll come in, they'll have a chat, they'll say, hey, I struggled, and particularly if they didn't play well, I'm underperforming, can I come and have a chat? They have a couple, you might give them a couple of tools, you might have a good conversation with them, all might be really, really good work. They go out, they play well for the next 4 weeks. 3 weeks later, they're not playing well, they come back, and it's just this, it's reactive, and it's a service. It's just, here's a few things. Well, we know that with the other aspects of performance, so imagine saying to the S&C coaches, when your players play bad, they'll come back into the gym. We'd never do that. We just think, no, we do the gym work every day, or the days that we're scheduled to do them, because it's a foundation of performance, and regardless of how we're playing, we need to be doing that well. Let's think about the skills stuff. Imagine if we said to player, went up to a coach and said, hey coach, I'm not actually going to do those drills you gave me. When I start playing bad, we'll do it then, eh? That's when we'll sort of attack the drills. And once again, we would say, it's absolutely ludicrous. It's not going to affect your development's going to be hampered. You're not going to get to where you're going to get to, because simply you can't have a reactive approach to your career. You can't have a reactive approach to getting better. You've got to build from strategy. So when I work with a team, they'll often come in, and this is where sort of a lot of this thought came from. And it's not a very good model, to be perfectly honest, but a lot of teams, and I'll describe how we can counteract this. So a lot of teams will say, we need someone in the mental space. They go find the person, okay, which I'm going to come back and talk a lot about the person. And then they throw them into a context. They give them a few hours a week, maybe a couple of days, and then they say, you build out what needs to be built out. And often that approach results in someone who had this vision for what they could possibly do with their work, largely sitting anonymous in a team setting, not quite sure where they fit, available for one-on-one work, limited impact on the collective mindset of the group, and simply not because they're not doing a good job, not because they might not be the right person, is that there's no structure. There's no structure to their work. There's no program. There's no steps. There's no processes. So all it is sort of meeting needs that arise, which we know from a performance aspect is not how you develop the most effective way. So what I'm going to do from this, I'm going to give you sort of a layout. Okay, so I want you to put on two hats. I want you to put on the hats of a modeling hat. So I'm going to give you some modeling here, but also want you to put on this hat. If I was walking into a team, so if you had spoken to me today, or, you know, like happens regularly, I'll have a team reach out and say, hey, Walshy, we don't have anything. We want to build a mental performance program. Where do we start? How do we do this? And I would probably suspect that in the upcoming years, I would imagine I still absolutely want to remain in the dirt and do that lovely work of working in the coalface with athletes and coaches every day. I love that part of my job, but a lot of my work has now shifted towards working with clubs and teams, because they're seeing what we talked about before, the necessity of the work to get established, but the inability to know how to do that really, really well. And so what I'm going to set up for you is, if I was walking into a club, what would I do? And so I'm going to go through 4 different things initially, and then I'm going to concentrate a lot as we get through this on the person. So the 4 things that I'm going to talk about is if I was walking in the club, there's 4 things I would do, and these are in chronological order, just so you are aware of that. Okay, number 1, here's number 1, okay? What model do you want? Okay, so I'll come back. I'm going to go through these in a bit of detail, so bear with me here. Number 2, what framework is the work going to be delivered through? Okay, so what framework? Do you have a framework of understanding of what you're trying to accomplish? Number 3, what is the content that's going to be critical, okay, for the team and for the club? And I'll go back why content becomes really, really important. And number 4, how do we deliver it? How do we actually deliver it? And every setting's a bit different. So the delivery of a mental skills training to a individual triathlete would be very, very different delivery wise from what it would have from what I do most weeks is with 45 rugby players in the room. So when we look at this, we've got to understand all of those factors. Okay, so here's number one. So number one, think about this model. So in modeling, I sort of came up with a number of different ways. So this is like a menu for a team. And once again, people say, do you do the same thing with every team? Never do the same thing with every team. Why? Because the context will always ask me, demand of me something different. Okay, so this is why I want to be very contextual when I think about modeling. So what I mean by that, if I'm with a team and they say we have half a day a week that you can come in, or half a day a month that you can come in to speak to our athletes, how many of you know that will be completely, utterly different from if I was in something every day? So the context does have a very, very big aspect on it, okay? So I'm going to give you some modeling, okay? Number one model, no program, okay? Just no program. So there's reasons why teams have no program. And the ones that I talked to, which were the majority of the people, gave some interesting reasons, okay? All the way from we've been successful, so we haven't seen the need. That would be one thing. And, you know, my response to that, you haven't been successful because you don't have a mental skills program. You've been successful in spite of not having a mental skills program. Imagine how much better you could actually be. So no program would be one. And another reason why people didn't have a program, they've had bad experiences in the past. So what I mean by that is they've had things happen where they've gone, geez, we had such and such in, it was just a disaster, it didn't work, we're bottling this, we're out. So number one, no program. Okay, number two, which is sort of common, minimalist program. And what I mean by minimalist program, you'd say, okay, we have someone that comes in pre-season, they have a chat around pressure. They might come in mid-season and maybe a day within the actual year and see the team, hang out, maybe have a chat with a few people one-on-one and then sort of go. And then at the end, they might come in and do a little bit of a review with us and talk about how we can get better next year. So once again, when I'm going through these different models, I want you to understand it's not one's better or the other. Obviously, there's going to be ones that will be optimal, more effective, and more meaningful. Okay, that's undeniable, and that will happen as you sort of understand as we go through this. So number three, which I think is probably the most common one, would be a deficit model. So what I mean with a deficit model, I've sort of referred to it here a little bit earlier, but I'll sort of unpack it a little bit more for you, is that it is the classic ambulance at the bottom of the hill. So when someone sucks, they come and have a chat to you. When they're underperforming, the coach sends them, hey, go talk to the mental guy. Unfortunately, it just perpetuates a narrative that we're trying to actually change, which is mental skills is for underperforming athletes rather than mental skills is for every athlete. But the deficit model keeps on saying to us and the moment we keep on buying into it. And listen, I understand the difficulty in this. Some of you are just maybe at the beginning of your career, or you're just exploring the work, and an opportunity arises. It may be volunteer, it may be paid, and you're like, Jesus, I've just got to get in here and do something. But the getting in there and do something isn't actually going to help you long term, because the getting in there and do something is actually in a model that's doomed to fail. I've never seen a deficit model work successfully. It may have limited impact in some one-on-one work with some individuals that are able to make some adjustments and changes. But once again, when we think about our overall all development philosophy, do we develop people more effectively by helping them grow in the things that they need to grow in and are already good at? Or do we help them grow, or do we help them become better athletes by simply just looking at what they're doing wrong? We know that the work on culture has limited impact. We know that jumping around from week to week to different subjects about where athletes need to improve is incredibly unhelpful for them. They feel like their development is schizophrenic and they don't know what they're doing. But if we have a strategic approach, everything changes. And to me, the deficit model is the ultimate demonstration of a reactive example, where all we're simply doing is whatever goes wrong, we try to react to it and change it. So deficit, very common, really, really limited impact. The fourth one was one that I think is getting a little bit more common. There's 5, so I'll give you the 5th one after this, just so you got it in context. The 4th one would what I'd be call a skills approach. So for those that are who have S&C background or any sports science background, you'd understand this. This would be very similar to what we would talk about being a needs analysis. So a needs analysis is basically made up of 3 steps. When you do a needs analysis, you assess the needs of an athlete, you prescribe an intervention, and then you monitor their progress. So when we're dealing with, or when we're thinking about a skill model, what we're saying is simply this philosophically. We believe that the mental side of performance is a skill. We don't just believe that you either have it or you don't have it, or that it's something that you just develop over time, or something that you can actually grow with, you can actually have a program about, you can actually become more mentally proficient if you're prepared to work. That's what we believe. We believe that the case. And so therefore that it's like any other skill acquisition. So if we think about, or skill development, if we think about getting stronger, what do? You go and sit with a trainer, and you ask the trainer, and you say to the trainer, hey, can you assess where I'm at? And they might do some testing, they might do some different stuff, and they go, all right, here's where you're at. All right, don't want to be here. I want to change. I mean, I'm very experienced in this world of trying to change. And so you would go, okay, can you give me a program? Here's your program. You might go do the program 3, 4, 5 weeks, and they come back and you sit with the trainer again and you say, hey, how are we going on that? What was working for you? What's not? They might do some retesting just to make sure that you've got, everybody understands the point here is that at least when we're treating it like a skill, we can say, this is a skill for everyone that can be developed and grown through. I can't tell you how many athletes, even at the highest professional level that I've had relationship with, who still to this day would say that they had no idea that they could get better at the mental side of the game. They just thought it was something they either had or had not. It's actually very, very interesting when you view it through those lenses. Like they just thought, well, I've always been this, or I can't cope under pressure, therefore I'm just going to accept that as part of my career. At least with a skill model, you're able to go, okay, we're identifying the areas where you can grow. We're going to give you some tools and stuff to help, and we'll go from there. Okay, so that would be the 4th part of the model. The 5th part of the model was what I think would the holy grail for all of us. I would call a fully integrated model. For those that have come from an organizational psychology background, another term for that could be PI, which is a psychologically informed environment. But for the sake of this webinar, I'll just sort of present it in quite, integrated is a good word. It's an easy term, and what it means, this is, and practically it could look like this. The mental side of performance we value so much that it actually has impact on the decisions we make around who we recruit. It has impact on the ways we coach. It has impact on the way we play and structure our game plan. We understand that so for example, in a game of rugby, there are many mental moments. So we understand, like, if you come from a rugby background, the set piece is probably where the biggest mental moments happen in rugby, for example. So if you steal a line out, if you get a scrum penalty, if you stop a maul, all that. Sorry for those that aren't rugby people, I'm just trying to give some examples here. That would be areas where you got these mental moments. What does that mean? The overall mindset of a team shifts from one place to another. It might go from belief to a bit of doubt. It might go from confidence to a little bit of questioning. It might go from we're behind here, that actually we can come and win this game. And so these mental moments shift. They actually make a shift in the overall feeling of the game. I think all of us would understand where those moments occur massively. And, if you watch any sport, you'll hear the commentators saying, or the presenters saying, listen, this is a big moment here. American football full of these massive moments. So, whether it's a 3rd and 11 or, on a critical drive when you need to get to a certain field position, there's this mental moments in every sport happening all the time. And so what we're able to do when we have an integrated model, we understand that we need to prepare people for those moments. We need to equip them for those moments. We need to train them for their moments. If you don't think the game has mental moments that determine outcome, then you'd never put any emphasis on the work that you need to do within that team context in order to prepare our people to navigate through them. It affects the way that we actually recruit. So we might say that You know, we want a certain mental proficiency in the people we recruit. How well do we know them? Do we know how they function under pressure? Can we ask people who they might have been on other teams with? So what I'm saying is that the integrated model has a massive, massive, massive impact on everything that's happening within the performance space. And that's where I think ultimately it can go. And in some places, it's definitely going there. Like if you think of, particularly, I've got some friends and done quite a bit of work in baseball. There's some teams now that have, you know, virtually unlimited resources, it sounds like. They're actually doing some really cool work in that space where the way that they do their draft or the way that they bring their coaches in or the way that they do their free agency has massive impact on the mental side. Now, my only little bit of critique is that I think we need to go beyond just doing personality testing, or we actually, and I know that's not limited to that, but we actually have to understand, like, how do we place them in positions to understand what their relationship with pressure is at? Because someone's relationship with pressure is going to have a massive impact on everything they do in the performance space. Okay, so that's the model. So hopefully everybody got that and understood it. So number one, when I'm working with a team, if I'm going into a team, I would go, okay, what model, what capability do you have here? What are we going to actually aim to do? And now I'm saying, listen, the integrated model would be the ultimate for everyone. As I said, it's a holy grail. We would love to all get there. The reality is that it's very, very difficult for any team to go from 0 to 100 in any space, let alone the mental space. So you might initially go, listen, we're going to come in and we're going to do a little bit of work and we're trying to develop a bit of a skill model. And as that impact grows within the team, you might see, okay, this is now changing. We're getting actually impact and we can see results from the work that's been done. Then you might go, okay, well, how can we grow this work? Are there other areas that we need to grow it within? And you can actually make a tremendous difference, but it goes back to understanding what model you're currently functioning in, what model your team has the capability of actually delivering with some sort of excellency. So, you know, I was talking to someone the other day, I still think it's very, very true. It's better to have no program than a half-assed program. If you have a program that's really not doing any impact, it actually sets the work back, because people are going, we've got someone in the room who comes in, they say nothing, do nothing. They text me every now and then or send me a message to check in how I'm doing. I virtually have no relationship with them. And in these vulnerable discussions around how I relate to pressure and the fear and the doubt that arises when I'm in that space, is that I'm not going to have that conversation with that person. So the conclusion is this mental stuff don't work. And it's not because the person lacked the ability or the proficiency. Sometimes they do, and they're just rubbish at what they're doing, but that's true in every field. It actually is that we've designed systems that have not enabled the work to be successful. So number one, modeling. Number two, framework. So framework is to me like the clothes hanger. What are you going to hang the work on? And, you know, you can have tons of different frameworks, but what I'll do instead of laboring into framework, I'm actually just going to give you an example of a framework that I would use pretty commonly. And I just call it my performance pyramid, mental performance pyramid. And so if you can imagine a triangle, so just imagine a triangle here, and we've got 3 layers. So we've got our foundational layer, we've got our middle layer, and we've got our top layer. And so when I think about particularly the role of mental skills and performance, is that I think it's really, really important to understand what outcome do we want with the work, and then how do we create a framework to serve that outcome. So those that have listened to me in the past, you'd understand I have a real simple approach to the outcome of the work, is that I want to bridge the gap between what someone is capable of and what they deliver, okay? So capability versus delivery. So example would be, you know, this is Joe. Joe trains amazing. Joe shows up every week to training. Joe's always on time. He nails the Bronco. He's number 1. His numbers in the gym are awesome. When he's on Tuesday, Thursday, man, we think we've got one of the best players in the league, or in whatever competition you're in. Come performance day, disappears. We don't get him. We can never access. We never see. We don't have the idea. We have an idea of what he could be capable of, but it doesn't show up. And so to me, that's the purpose of the work. So if you understand that's the purpose of so the work is about growing people. That's my point. The work is about growing people into their capability. It's about growing people into their potential. And so I designed a little growth framework, and I'll share this with you today. It's not hot IP, honestly. The magic is not actually in the design of the framework. The magic is actually probably in the delivery of the framework, which I will get to. So if you think of these 3 layers, bottom layer, grow yourself. Okay, so let me talk about that. And there's going to be something I'm going to attach a C to each one of these aspects of the framework. Okay, so when I think about grow yourself, what C am I trying to develop? Okay, the C that I'm trying to develop is consistency of habits. Okay, so when we think about grow yourself, what I'm talking about, and I'll sort of give you an idea of how I would do a grow yourself engagement or interaction with someone. I'd sit down with someone and say, okay, I want to understand about how we can grow you. This is not necessarily about what happens on the field, though it's going to have massive impact on the field. This is understanding about creating a blueprint for you to be able to perform at your best. And there's going to be some key things that you would need to understand as an athlete in order for that to happen. So when I think about grow yourself, I think about a few questions that I'd ask them. Okay. Number one is, why do you play the sport? Okay. What are we trying to do there? The why becomes important because there's been so much work done on the why of this and the why of that. Listen, the why to me has one purpose when I'm asking that question in this setting, is that I want to understand people's motivational pathways. What's motivating people? Okay, what's actually motivating them to do what they do? If I can understand their why, I can understand their motivation. Number two, what are you trying to accomplish? Aspirations, goals, whatever you want to call that. Why is the what important? The what enables us to go, where are they actually going? How big are they dreaming? What vision do they have for their career? And so if someone comes in and says, listen, I'd like to play 3 Super Rugby games and go to France. Okay, fantastic. That could obviously be a great aspiration. Someone might come into my setting and go, I want to be an All Black. Okay. If you're having those conversations and the actual trajectory or destination of where someone's going in their career, that defines a lot. Okay, how aspirational are you? Do you understand? Okay, this is what you're trying to do. Okay, well, we better get to work. The next thing is how. Okay, this is in this grow yourself, the bottom aspect. Okay, how? What I want to know is this: do you understand what areas of your game you need to be working on? Do you understand where you need to be growing? Do you understand what needs to take place? Like, I think it was Albert Bandura, who I absolutely loved Albert Bandura's work over the years, and he had this thing about goal setting, and it was under the lens of self-efficacy, but it was actually about goal setting. He talked about these goals have got to have a proximal and a distal destination. So your distal destination, in the case of example might be, I need to be an All Black. Okay, what's your proximal work? What's your proximal work? What's the pathway? What do you need to be doing? So this is the how. The how's going, what do you need to be doing? What areas do you need to be focusing on? So that becomes an important part. The fourth thing I'd ask them is when are you doing the work? Okay, so what I've found is that there's normally the guys that are pretty elite or the girls that are pretty elite I've worked with, they can translate aspirations into schedules. I know that might sound really, really quite flowery, but it's not. It's like they can take aspirations, they can take plans, and then they translate it into the schedule. So if you think about it, you go, okay, what's my aspirations? The plan is a strategy is how I'm going to get there. The missing link for a lot of people is when that occurs. Okay, so this is you grow yourself. We're giving them the foundations for their career to be able to be developed. So when we think about the when, we're thinking about that's time management. Okay, do you have a weekly schedule? So a lot of our players I work with, I don't demand, but I do ask them to have a weekly schedule. I want them to understand what they need to know, how they're using their time. And I remember growing up, my mother always used to say to me, time is the biggest reflector of what you value, not money. And it's a very, very true thing. If you understand how you're using your time, if you said to me, I'm going to show you what I did in my 184 hours last week, I can tell you by the end of you showing me that, what you value, what's important to you. So the when, and then the final one is who are your people? Who's your support? Who's on your journey? So you can see from something like that grow yourself. So imagine, someone at the end of it, here's what I want them to understand. Okay, so they understand, they go, okay, why? I know why I'm motivated. What? I know my aspirations. How? I have to take ownership over this sort of stuff. When? I understand my time scheduling, and who? I understand my support. So I think from a grow yourself foundation, I think someone who understands what they're motivated, has a clear knowledge of where they're trying to get to, has created a structure as far as what activities are going to be important, have created a schedule so they use their time well to go towards that goal, and finally they have enough support from the people that are around them to get there. I think that's a great foundation. I think we can go, okay, that's a good foundation. So grow yourself down there. Second one, okay, everyone got this? Grow your mindset, okay? And I'm going to do a real quick one around mindset. So mindset's really simple to me. Mindset is how you see yourself and how you relate to the world around you. So I'll give you an example of the influence of mindset. For a lot of my life, I saw myself as an imposter, and I saw the world as a place where I got exposed. I don't know if any of you, I mean, I'm sure if we did a raised hand here, we would get a lot of people that could understand that approach to life at times. Like it would be like, yeah, I see, someone's going to find out one day that I'm not very good at what I do. I've felt that over the time, over the time. And then the world is a place where I get exposed. Now, obviously, as I've grown in experience and confidence and trust and belief, and the world becomes different. You see yourself as competent, and you see the world as a place where opportunity exists. So just think about how different that mindset is and how much that would impact the way that an athlete, for example, operates. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to shift their mindset away from threat sensitivity into opportunity sensitivity. They begin to actually focus more on their strengths than they do on their weaknesses. So an athlete who is strength-based in their focus, who sees the world that they live in as an opportunity for them to have impact and to grow and to achieve some awesome things, their mindset becomes radically different from an athlete who walks in the door going, I'm really unsure of myself. I feel like I'm an imposter and everything around me is a threat, because that thing around me, whether it's the environment, whether it's a game, whether it's coaches, whether it's teammates, that's a potential place of exposure for me where people actually begin to discover that I'm not who I thought I would be. And then we have this whole dance happening mentally and internally with people. So when you think about growing your mindset becomes a massive aspect of your performance. So what I'm sort of reminding you here. So we've got people that are understanding what makes them grow, people that are understanding their mindset, and then finally this one, grow under pressure. I'm not going to go much into that because I know that the time is slipping away from us here quickly. But when I think about grow under pressure, once again, it's someone who has done all the work. They're really well prepared. They've got a good foundation to understand why they perform well. They've got a great mindset towards performance. Honestly, 9 times out of 10, the top thing takes care of itself. There might be some work where people go, okay, I still have a bit of a relationship with pressure that I need to define. And so that would, to me, be a little bit of a framework, and also a bit of a prioritization for those that are out in the field practicing. The prioritization aspect is that, you can say, oh, breathing's really important under pressure, or visualization is a key to performance. And I would agree with you on both of those statements wholeheartedly, but you wouldn't introduce that day one if someone doesn't have the foundations of their performance in place. And so, to use an analogy of cricket, I know there's probably not many cricketers here. There might be a few. To use this analogy would be simply this. Hey, when you learn cricket, you learn a forward defense. You learn the basics well, for use of a better term. Once you've learned the basics, you can do other stuff. And so giving someone visualization, if they don't have a foundation for their performance, is like telling a cricketer, we're going to teach you the reverse sweep first, or something quite complex, before we've laid the foundations. You need the foundations to build on the other stuff. And so I think what happens sometimes in the mental performance world, we have these sort of trinkets, and they come along and they're like, like magpies. You know how magpies go and grab shiny things? We have all these shiny things, and we have this magpie mindset. Like, I'm going to go grab the next shiny thing I see. I'm going to bring it back to my nest. This is what magpies do, and they never use it. And so we might have this all of a sudden, like mindfulness became a key word the last 3 or 4 years. I appreciate mindfulness. It has an amazing impact on people, an amazing role. But if you're practicing mindfulness, but you're disorganized, you have no vision of where you want your career to go, you don't plan, you don't manage your time well, and you have no support, I don't think mindfulness is going to be overly helpful. So it's not a critique of mindfulness, but more it's an understanding of how we must prioritize the work to have the impact that we imagine. Okay. Next thing, content. So when we think about content's a brilliant one to think about. Okay. So content, I've got one simple phrase that's probably going to help you, and hopefully you'll understand this really, really simple. The game gives you clues. Okay. So to me, there's 3 types of sport when I think about mentally, and I'll just do a quick overview on these. Number one, there's these individual endurance maniacs. Okay, so I'm thinking about my mate Maisie here, who decided to ride halfway around Australia last year. I'm thinking about different people who, go do these, like Goggins and all those guys, which I know is awesome. I mean, I was always like quite not skeptical. I was like, Goggins is just a machine, and how will he actually impact people? And then I've got a 13-and-a-half-year-old son who runs 5K a day, and he listens to Goggins when he runs. I love Goggins. Keep doing this to my boy. This is tremendous impact. So you have your endurance athletes, and a lot of their messaging, a lot of their stuff may be around, oh geez, how do I keep pushing through the pain locker? How do I stay focused on mile 1 of a 180-mile bike ride? There's so many different things around that you can just you can understand. That's a whole different set of mental skills. Okay. Number 2, which is the one where we see the most mental struggles, and this is going back to content. Remembering, we're defining what needs to be spoken about. Sports like golf, where you initiate the movement. So everybody knows or understands those sports where you initiate the movement. So what I mean by that is, great question, Shane. I'll go back to it. I'm actually going to go back. Shane's just helped me out massively. So when I go back to the framework, I forgot that part. Thank you, Shane. So grow yourself equals consistency. Grow your mindset equals confidence. Grow under pressure equals clinicalness. That's for you, Shane. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. So when we think about it, grow yourself with developing consistency. Okay. And consistency always breeds confidence. Okay. So if you have a mindset where you see yourself as A, B, and C, you have a hell of a lot more confidence. And then the delivery of your skill set under pressure is, to me, how we develop clinicalness. So thank you, Shane, for that. So going back to the content. Brilliant, Shane. I would have forgotten, you're a man. Okay. So content. Number 1, endurance sports. Number 2, sports where you initiate movement. What a nightmare. We've seen some absolute breakdowns over the years with those, haven't we? Where the initiating movements are, like it might be a pitcher in baseball. It might be a kicker in NFL. Might be free throws in basketball. Might be goal kick. So in rugby, there's only 2, maybe 3 things where you initiate the movement. It's goal kicking, line out throwing, and kicking for touch. And kickoffs, you can sort of put them in, or field kicking might be in the same. Meaning this is that there's no one else determining what happens apart from you as the play unfolds. And so why they become really difficult places for people to function through is that the initiation of those movements give a lot of space for what? There's a lot of space for thinking. There's a lot of space for that stuff to come through. And so when that happens, when you're the one that are initiating movement, I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to, particularly being a golfer, over a golf ball going, I have a million things going through my head. So the initiate movement. And then the third one is you're responsive to movement. Okay. So why is that important? So responsive to movement, or your evasive sports, or your sports where you have to basically play what's in front of you, for use of a better term. And so why is that important from a content aspect? Okay, the content aspect becomes very, very important in this regard. And this is what the research was telling us. The research was telling us is that one of the things that the coaches came back and said, a lot of what we were hearing was completely irrelevant to the needs of the players. Okay, so imagine that you get someone in and they don't understand the game. They might not understand what's happening. They might not understand what the needs are of the game. And all of a sudden they get up and do their first session with the team, and it's about, say, brain chemistry, or it might be something like brilliant stuff, but completely irrelevant. So I'm going to give you, help you understand this, is that think about the content in 2 ways. Number 1, what are the needs of the sport? And then if you're a coach, have a think about it in this other way. What are the positional demands? So for example, the demands on a goal kicker are going to be different from a quarterback to a prop in rugby, to a center in netball, to a goalkeeper in football. They're all going to be different, but the game's going to tell you, the game's going to give you clues, and the position's going to give you clues of what content needs to be developed in order for it to be relevant and impactful for the athletes. Okay, so we've got that on content. And the last one is delivery. Okay, and I'll just do a short little bit here on delivery. Delivery is this. Delivery is a really simple thing for me. Is that how do we get the key messages across? And with 3 things in mind, in a way that is simple. Okay, got to have simple stuff. In a way that is relevant. I've already talked about that. And the third thing is this: in a way that is applicable. So if I think about whenever I stand in front of a group, stand in front of you guys, stand in front of a team, work across the different teams that I work with, I'm thinking 3 things. Okay, how do I make this work simple? They've got to be able to understand it. They've got to be able to understand what you're saying. Number two, how do I make it relevant? I can't talk about stuff that has little or no relevancy to their needs. I can't talk about, it's not going to help. And then thirdly is what can I give them when they walk out of the room? One or two tools that they can apply. Now, the relevance thing was a difficult thing for me to learn because my ego got in the way. So I was thinking I need to, in some sense, make sure that I look competent, or they understand the information coming through, or that I think we all get caught up in that as coaches in particular, going, this is not actually what they need, but I like this. I've been studying it. I've been watching this. This is cool. And it's almost like we just grab something that is interesting to us, or something but what we actually need to do is sit back and go, if I was in their position sitting in the room and I was about to do A, B, and C, what would I need? So we've got to make the needs relevant. Okay. So closing out that first section is that in the research, they said, listen, integration, the number one thing getting in the way, and I'll describe it in their language, which is a nice way of describing it. We can't create buy-in across the board. And I put my hand up and go, because your system doesn't allow it. So defining the system, point number one, okay? Defining the system is critical. Now, let me get to the person, but I wanted to go system first, and I hope you'll appreciate and understand why I went system first, is that so often teams look for the person first, and this becomes a bit of an issue long-term. And what I mean by that, I was just talking to a team this week I'm doing some work with, and excuse me, they had someone in there for 4 to 6 years, doing a great job, fantastic job, great person, great practitioner. That person got another offer from another team, which happens if you're doing a good job, and they're no longer with the team. And what happened is the moment that person left the room, the whole work left the room. So my encouragement, particularly if you have some leadership role in clubs and teams, is you should be holding the strategy and the plan for the mental performance. Then you find the person to deliver it. I would suggest 90% of teams are doing the opposite right now. And this is what the research was telling us, is that they kind of said it in their words, we can't find the right person and we can't get buy-in. What I'm saying is, the reason you can't get buy-in is because, and the reason why you think you've often found the wrong person is because you've got the order wrong, basically. You're saying to someone, hey, go build a program, where I'm suggesting every team should have a mental performance strategy. And then we find the people to deliver it. You don't do that with the other stuff. You don't say, all right, we're going to do S and C and we're going to have no program. We're just going to find someone to come in and just create it. We go, no, we have a program. We know what we want our athletes to be able to do. We want them fit, fast, strong, and available, right? Of our 4 things that you want. We got to go kind of find the person to be able to deliver on those 4 things. If we talk about the mental side of it, we want mentally proficient players who are able to deliver when it matters in big moments, who love playing the sport and who have a sustainable approach to their life. Who's going to deliver that? That should be the strategy or the vision of what we're trying to create. And right now, all we do is go find someone, put an ad on LinkedIn, go put ask someone, do you know anyone? Yeah, we go and sit down for a 10-minute interview with the head coach and the performance director. They're like, sweet, hey, come in half a morning a week or 2 mornings a week and build a program. It's completely backwards. So let me now transition to the person. And so once again, just want to remind you guys, we've been going, quite a bit here. If you have any questions, fire them through. I might not be able to get to them straight away, but I'm going to leave a bit of time at the end. So that I wanted to use most of the time this morning around that conversation. And then I'll kind of skip through the next 2 parts, though they're important, but it'll just help you understand. Okay. So when they were saying this, we can't find the right person. This is a really interesting one for me. Why can't you find the right person? Do you know what you're looking for? And what I found out is that almost none of these people had a vision. And when I'm talking about vision, I'm talking about writing it down. I'm talking about they couldn't visualize what a good person in their environment would look like and what that work would look like if it was done well. They couldn't see it. They couldn't visualize that. And so what I began to do is take, as these conversations unfolded and reflecting on my own experience, talking to other practitioners who I think do outstanding work, I sort of came up with 5 or 6 things that were common around the people that were doing quality work. So this is probably the best way. So when we think about the person, what are the characteristics of someone doing quality work? Because honestly, there is no integration without the right person. There's no integration without a good system. We're just dreaming. All we'll do is keep on doing the stuff over and over again of having no system set up, not necessarily getting the right person in, and just seeing this stuff fail over and over again. Okay, so I'm going to give you these characteristics right now. Okay, number one, they were tradesmen more than they were philosophers. Some of you would have heard me say this before, but this became a shifting moment for me, is that ideas stimulate change, actions make that change possible. So you can, and I think sometimes what happened was in the mental performance world, when you're idea focused and you're theory focused, what begins to happen is that you create an appetite and feed no one. And then that's when the resentment of the work sort of comes in, is that, hey, I'm going to give you some theory or some ideas or some research around and that's my presentation. And the people go, great research, great ideas, great. What do I do? What do I actually do? And, you know, the caricature, unfortunately, that still exists within some clubs of the mental performance role is someone comes in to a training, they're on the sideline with a clipboard taking notes, and they go back and give feedback to the coach. I mean, yes, that's part of the job, perhaps. And yes, there could be some impact there. But what I think is way more successful is not coming looking for ideas and looking for principles and only looking for theories. I think you come into your work as a tradesman going, what do I have in my tool belt today to be able to give to people? These are tools, not just ideas, they're tools, practices, processes, whatever you want to call it, behaviors, action, You're getting my gist here, I think. What do I have in my toolbox today? What can I bring to you? What can I help you with? So when we have people that were tradesmen, they came with that tradesman's mentality of seeing themselves as a coach rather than just seeing themselves as an observer, seeing someone else who's prepared to get their hands dirty. So people ask me, like, when you go to training, what do you do? I said, I hold bags, I pass some drills, I do whatever's required. I'm on the side. I don't want to be sitting back with yes, and Jimmy did this today. That's great. It may have its place, but at the end of the day, they want to engage with you because of the tools that you've given them and your ability to be in the dirt with them, not to stand afar and just make judgments. Okay. Number two, and I spoke about this in the content, but I'll just quickly cover it again. Understand the demands. They understand the demands. So they're able to come in and they go, okay, very, very quickly, I know that there's going to be 3 or 4 things that are going to be critical mentally for this player to be able to perform at their best. So for example, if I'm dealing with a hooker in rugby, a goal kicker, or, if we're going to other sports, someone taking a penalty, a shooter in netball, different things like this, a golfer on the first tee, you're going to sit there and go, you're going to have some sort of process in your performance for those big moments to enable you to put your focus on the right things and not get distracted by the outcome. Okay, that would be a simple thing. We go, man, that's something you're just going to develop. Okay, so that would be understanding the demands and then creating it. Okay. The third thing, which I think is really underestimated that these really good practitioners were able to do, and that was missing in the people that were failing to have the impact that they all desired, was simply this, that they understood team dynamics, which is a really interesting one for me. So let me just give you a minute on this. We often think, and if you want any, if you want to understand team dynamics and the impact of this stuff, go buy Owen Eastwood's book on belonging. Probably the best book I've ever read on understanding how teams function like they do. So Owen Eastwood, Belonging is the name of the book. Why teams function like they do and what we can do to do a much better job of creating some real solid foundations of those teams to actually perform well. And I love what Owen's work is around the relational side of it, meaning this is belonging as the foundation of high-performing teams, which is an amazing concept. Very, very true. And I will not talk about it much because I'll never give his work justice. But what I mean by understanding team dynamics, you can have someone that is struggling a little bit around pressure and stuff, but if they have bad relationships with their coaches, if they don't like being in the environment, if they feel like the culture is toxic, that will pervade over all of the performance work. Okay, so we've got to understand that when these team dynamics are happening, that is going to have a massive impact on the mindset of a player. I can talk to a player about having a mindset for a game. If he has tension or conflict with the head coach, That's what's influencing him more than anything else in his performance that week. His experience or her experience in the environment will have significant impact on people, okay? So number 3, understanding group dynamics. Number 4 is they were able to take the group somewhere, okay? Collectively. Let me make sure you understand that collective part. The mental skills work can't be reduced to one-on-one, okay? You need to have some collective work where you're taking the whole group, like you might have a mindset anchor for the week. You might have a focus with the group for the week. Just something simple where you go, okay, individually you might be doing your work, preparing you to play. But when you think about this way, so when I talk about a group somewhere or a collective mindset, you might be coming into a fixture and you go, what mindset are we going to need to be able to deliver on the game plan that's going to be successful in us putting out a good performance? Simple question. Okay, what mindset then? Okay, right. Then how do we develop that? What's that going to look like? So you might be going into a really tough conditions against a really hostile environment, against a team that plays a certain way, and it might be massive grit, massive perseverance, massive care for each other, massive fighting, keep turning up, okay? Adapt when things don't go your way. Okay, you might be going to another game, we need to throw it around, we need to be courageous, we need to be brave, we need to back ourselves, we need to have belief. So you can see now, all right, we're bringing collective mindset into the ability of the team to deliver a plan. Now we're getting impact with the group. Now we're actually shaping the way that their performance will go because of that. Okay, another thing that's important, it's a bit separate, but I think it's worth noting anyway, is that there was a real clear definition in the role between well-being and performance. I think this is a big subject. I don't want to labor on it too much, probably don't have time. But well-being is the foundation of people performing well, their personal well-being, but it's not the totality. And the moment you have someone in the building to do both, I haven't seen it yet be massively successful. Not because of the competency of the practitioner, but because of the time. So, for example, with the Chiefs, I have 42 players in at any time, back and forth with injuries and da-da-da. I struggle on the time that I have over with the Chiefs to be able to deliver on the performance work. I could never imagine trying to do the other work as well. It just absolutely, if I had to do well-being as well, it would just overwhelm me. So you got to understand that those roles should be, in some sense, a separate thing together, and a separate thing totally. And what I mean by this, you'll understand this. The skills to work on the well-being stuff and the skills to work on the performance stuff, they're actually quite a different skill set. So, a lot of the well-being work is better towards someone who has a clinical background, who's done all that stuff. I'm not saying I'm not doing black and white, I'm just doing generalizations. Whereas the performance stuff might be someone with a different background. Okay, so my point is define. Gets confusing for players if they don't know the difference. And then the final thing around the person is more of a personal one, but it did come up in the research a little bit, is that they were able to identify the hungry. So where you get into trouble in the work that I do and that many of you do is when you try to, so I have a principle, it's called feed the hungry. So if you're hungry, I'll help you. If you're not hungry, then I'm not going to try to convince you to have an appetite. I don't have enough time in the environment, but if you say I want to grow, I'll give you every single thing I've got. I'm not going to chase you. I'm not going to message you. I'm not going to come across as an insecure coach trying to convince you you should be working with me. I don't care about that at all. I'm going to say, if you want to work with me, I'm here. Okay. And I'm going to present each week. You'll get an idea of the work we're doing. If you want to grow, I'll give you everything, but I'm not going to chase you. Okay. So I think a person that where they got into trouble previously was when you had someone trying to race around to all of these people. They weren't feeding the hungry. They spent most of the time convincing those that didn't have an appetite that they should be eating. They were, in some senses, had well-being and performance going on at the both times, and they felt sort of all over the place. They didn't do any collective work, so the group couldn't see the impact. Didn't really understand the team dynamics and knew that things went well, but they thought, well, how much impact does that have? They had good knowledge around sports psychology or in general, but they didn't actually provide something that was relevant and understand the demands. And then they were much more of a philosopher than a tradesman. That would say to me, if those 5 things are happening, that work is going to have no impact. So even though the system is critical, the person is just as critical, maybe a little bit below that, because the reason is I've seen excellent people do great work, but the system prevented them from having impact that they wanted. But when we get the system right and we get the person right, we're away. And what I'm going to end with, I'm going to take about 5 more minutes, and then I'm going to open this up for the next 15, 20 minutes for any questions or comments. Apologies that I can't see you. I would love to, but it's just the way that these webinars work, okay? So the work, okay, I'm going to finish with 5 things, okay, that the research confirmed, and also the work, a little bit from my experience as well, around these 5 things were critical when there was success. There was integration, okay? Number 1, and it's a number 1 by a long way, alignment with the head coach, okay? You can't have impact without alignment. That alignment with the head coach is probably the most critical part. That's the most critical part of my work. Had a mentor a few years ago said, your primary client is the head coach. And I know it's a bit of a corporate way of saying it, but it's very true. That's a primary person for me. That was very, very necessary for me to have some sort of relationship with. So if you're not aligned with the head coach, you can get in conflict, sending messages that aren't, pushing everyone in the same direction. Number 2 is driven by everyone. This is important. This is so important. The biggest impact on mindset in a team is normally the head coach. It's not me. It's not me. I'm just there to help provide tools and help move it forward and reinforce it. But when we talk about in our setting, everybody has an impact on the mindset of our people every day. It's not just one person's role. And so that means that we do quite a bit of work as staff to make sure that they've got the tools to be able to deliver some key messages when they need to. Number 3 was probably the one that is the most challenging, but yet probably the most necessary to probably talk about as far as the work itself being successful, is that there was time given, that there was actual time reserved. In high performance, what you pay someone is not the measure of value always. It's how much time you give them. So you can pay someone $20K a year, put them in a room 2 days a week and tick a box, or you can integrate them, give them room to speak to the team, give them time for that work to happen. So in high performance, the currency of value is time, and you can't have impact without time. 4th thing was this: they had some clear understanding about what impact would look like. Okay, so our work's got to have some impact goals. Okay, whether that be we win away from home, we beat the teams that we should, we close out games in the last little bit of time. Like, they can be whatever you want them to be, but we should have some loose impact goals that give us an idea of whether the work that we've been doing. So, for example, with the Chiefs, we had a year where we lost 5 games within 5 points in the last 5 minutes. We knew that our boys were not coping well in those final moments. We did some work around that and really went hard after that the last few years. And we've become a team that can close out games. Now, we won't close out every game, so we're not robots. We're going to have games where we don't close out. But for the most part, we understand what's required of us to close out games, and there's been some impact around that. And then the final thing is just defining what success looks like in the work. It's a bit different because there's no GPS on the brain, which makes it a bit challenging for us. But there is an ability for us to understand and go, okay, well, what does actual success look like here? What does it actually look like when the work is integrated well? And so from a personal perspective, I have 3 things that I try to provide as my success measures. They're not outcome, they're non-outcome. So did I provide the right knowledge? Did I provide the right tools? And did I provide the right support? So if I can do those 3 things pretty much every day well, then I think I've got a pretty good opportunity at impacting the people where I want to. So going back and bringing it around to circle, and then I'm going to stop the recording here shortly. For integration to occur, you've got to have a system set up for success. You've got to identify the right person who is able to deliver the right behaviors and deliver a program. And finally, you've got to have the work envisaged or designed in a way that everybody can see where the impact can occur. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you for listening. I'm going to actually stop the recording, and then I'm going to open up the Q&A for everyone.